Now, I've got to get something off my chest. Someone I know, a good bloke, has just told me his mother is seriously ill. Now, I won't give you details. I haven't got his permission. Very seriously ill. But he's in Victoria and his mum's in South Australia. He's the eldest son. He hasn't been able to see her for months. Well, she's going to hospital. Hasn't been able to see her, just to hold her hand. I saw his distress. Now, I know this bloke is not alone. You know, other people are in exactly the same position, as he said. Some have had their relatives die without having been there to comfort them in their last moments. This is insane. It's so heartless, it's so pointless, it's so cruel. You've got politicians inventing bans that are meant to save us. Save us from what? This misery? Let this bloke in. Let this bloke in. Quarantine him if you insist. But let him see his mum. I mean, what is happening now to this country, the Australians, let this kind of stuff be tolerated? And then to hear the South Australian Health Minister, what a goose. Hear him an hour ago trying to justify to our Chris Kenny the decision to let in not Victorians desperate to comfort a very, very sick mother, but 300 foreign students bringing their money with them. They're going to fly in, these students, to South Australia next month.
The reality is that we've got mandatory supervised isolation for incoming international students.
But not for Victorians.
Yeah, why not have this mandatory detention for Victorians too? Why this hard border? What the hell's going on? And then from this same health minister, this shiftiness.
What countries are your overseas students coming from?
Well, their port of dispatch is Singapore.
I knew something was up. Yes, the port of embarkation is Singapore, where, by the way, their infection rate is still about half of Victoria's, just over half, in fact. So a bit of risk there. But while this plane is leaving from Singapore, a lot of students on board are actually from China. He didn't want to say that, did he? Didn't want to say that. South Australia. The politicians there, their hearts melt at the thought of some Chinese money being flown in. But the tears of Australians suffering right here, of Victorians wanting to come to South Australia to comfort their mum, nah. Nah. Stay out. But to more positive news, in New South Wales, just 3 new infections today. Just 3. The chances of getting this virus in New South Wales in the past 24 hours, just 1 in 2 million. But Queensland still won't let them visit. Maybe the people in Sydney should just call themselves Chinese students instead. In Victoria, many more new infections than that, 222. But that is at least the lowest in a month. But deaths, 17 more, all of people older than 60. 14 of them, people older than 80. 13 of them in aged care homes. Isn't that so familiar? We have bans on everyone imposed by governments that didn't do the very basic job, like keeping old people safe, particularly nursing homes, and we're now paying the price. Now, there is something else about this that I think is not just unfair, but a real worry for our future. We're told we're all in this together, and you know that is bull. There's no way that this burden is being shared evenly. For instance, if you are a public servant, congratulations. Or if you're a politician deciding on these bans, if you get a government salary, you are doing beautifully in comparison. For a start, your chance of losing your job are about 0. In fact, the Institute of Public Affairs calculated that since this virus really took off in March, governments hired even more public servants, 14,000 of them. But in the private sector, meanwhile, more than 600,000 workers lost their jobs. So many public servants. So few people now in the private sector to create the wealth to pay for them. In fact, it's even worse than that. You've got the economy tanking, you've got businesses crashing, you've got wages falling, but in Victoria, the worst hit state, public servants 50,000 of them just voted to accept pay rises of 3%. Hey, just before Christmas too. Their Christmas stockings will be full. In the Northern Territory, the Labor government there has also just offered pay rises to public servants. What a coincidence. Just in time for Saturday's election. These are pay rises that are paid for by people who run private businesses or work in private businesses. They include people who risk their savings to start a private business and create the jobs. The politicians' bans are now crushing. People are now getting crunched by these bans, particularly in Victoria. How is this fair? And even that's not the worst of it. These pay rises for public servants, they are funded by taxes like government land taxes. Even now, governments are still demanding land taxes from businesses that have meanwhile smashed with their bans. I'll show you how it works. When I worked at the Age newspaper, years that paper would rather forget ever happened, I nurtured this viper. Journalists would drink at a small one-storey pub called the Golden Age. And then the Caston family, Greeks actually, they bought it. And over 27 years since, Demetrius Caston and his dad and other family members turned that small building into a 7-storey budget hotel. This was their dream, called it the Sophia. Demetrius tells me today that he and his dad did a lot of the work themselves because money was so tight. But now, of course, the hotel has been absolutely smashed by the government, closed for business, virus bans, no income coming in, none at all. Workers kept on only because of JobKeeper. But meanwhile, of course, the business's entitlements, the worker entitlements, they keep rising. They've got to be paid out at some stage. But while the business of this hotel has been smashed by the Victorian government, no money coming in, that same government has meanwhile got its hand out asking for $60,000 in land tax. Pay up, please, $60,000. And around the state and around the country, in fact, you got business saying, what the? No income, thanks to you, but I've still got to pay your land tax? Demetrius Caston has appealed and appealed against this. No dice. Pay up. And now he knows why. He has to pay land tax from a business with zero income so that the Victorian government can afford to pay more pay rises for public servants. You know where an economy run like that ends up, don't you? Hint, Cuba. We're all in this together. My foot.